Hey everybody, this is Jim Neve from Jim Neve Woodworks. I got asked today to do a quick review of my table saw setup. Somebody noticed in some of my videos that I had customized some of the hardware around it, so I thought I'd do a quick video, just kind of a walk around. I don't have any drawings or anything on this, so what I'm going to try to do is just give some close-up shots to give people an idea how I built it, just so they can have some ideas and maybe some things they want to do. So I'm starting with just a standard Powermatic 5 horsepower table saw, and I wanted a cutoff gauge here, really a sliding cutoff table, but I couldn't find one to buy that I liked. They were all, I don't know, just not big enough and didn't have the features I wanted, so I built everything myself. So I'm going to take you through all sides here and show you what I did. So I'm going to start with the sliding cutoff table because that's kind of the main thing. I use this all the time. It has 6-foot linear rails I just bought off of Amazon. All of the extrusions are just 80/20 or some other brand of extrusions, aluminum extrusions. This one has, with the 6-foot rail, it's only a single stage. I was going to stack up 2 stages of rails so I got more range, but in the end I didn't feel like I really needed that much range, and I wanted the extra rigidity of just having a single stage. So these linear rails are 6 foot long, and it gives me about 3 foot of travel based on how far I spread the 2 rail block rails in here. So this is a large heavy duty thing. I can put a full sheet of plywood on and slide it through. Then the other things are, it's also a full sliding, the table itself slides inside the table, so these blocks are grooved to fit inside these grooves, and that way I can do some pretty extreme angles on this, and I can also slide it forward and do the extreme angles, and then this slides this way as well, so I can always keep my end of my fence really close to the blade, which is something I did not like about some of the smaller miter gauges that go in the miter slot. Is once you go out to 45 degrees, they can end up pretty far away from the blade. So I can get support with this very well. And you know, I've also obviously put some sandpaper on here to keep it from sliding really easy. That makes it stick really well when you're trying to hold a piece there and maybe cutting a really extreme angle. The wood doesn't want to slide on here and feed into the blade, it stays put. I've also added a stop that can go anywhere down the line. These are just standard Rockler toggle clamps that I've used. They work really well. I can set this up and get it squared really quickly too. What I do for square is I just take the big framing square. This is a precision framing square. It's not just this, you know, $2 one, but you can line this up with the miter slot really quick and then just lock it down and get it to be exactly 90 degrees very well. So let's take a close-up look and kind of walk around, and I'll show you all the components and what they look like. All right, let's start underneath the carriage here. So this is supported with some rigid or pretty thick gauge angle iron that I bolted onto the edge of the left tabletop, and it comes down along here, and then this is supported right down onto my mobile base. So this is just a plain old Shop Fox mobile base. You can see I've raised the saw up about 3 or 4 inches because I like the working height to be a little bit taller than the standard one. So that was the first thing I did, is lift that up.
And then because all of these extrusions are kind of modular and you can slide them around, I'm just using standard T-nuts in them. That's how I can just slide this in and adjust it so that I get this rail to be the right height that I want. And it's key because I want the rails of the sliding table to be just slightly higher than the fence or the table itself, so that when I slide things back and forth, first I don't want the fence dragging on top of the tabletop, and so when this comes in, it glides over the top, it doesn't scratch the top, and it doesn't hit the top when it goes through. So I have this maybe a 32nd of an inch higher, and it also helps when I'm cross-cutting then to keep everything sliding free, because most of the weight is supported on top of the table. If we go around the side here, we can see the linear rails are bolted right to the bottom of this extrusion, and then the blocks are bolted to the horizontal cross member that comes back from the table that I just showed. So it's pretty simple. Again, just a 6-foot rail on the two outside extrusions, and then just some simple struts that come right down to the mobile base and are bolted on. So again, then I made a few cross pieces under here that are also aluminum. They're just 3-inch wide by 1/2-inch aluminum plate that I painted black.
Now if we look at the fence setup itself, I just built all of this out of mesquite because that was what I had, and mesquite is extremely hard and very strong. So if I take this, I can remove this fence completely to allow me to work with sheet goods. And if you look at the bottom, these mesquite blocks just have a groove on each side so that they slide in between the horizontal rails that make up this top. So I can take it out and put it back in pretty quickly. Just like that. And then, like I said before, I square it, simply kind of snug this one down, leave this one loose. I just use these Rockler toggle clamps on the back here so that the fence can slide back and forth, so I can get it where I want it over here. And then after I've squared it with respect to the miter gauge slot, then I just lock these all down in here. The other thing I've done is added this miter gauge. It looks like my battery's just gone dead, but the miter gauge is tied to the block, and it's just one of those little digital gauges. They're accurate to a fraction of a degree, but it will display the angle here, and it's one of those that just has the sliding bar in the end. I've mounted it to this block, and the pivot is exactly over the pivot for this bolt underneath that tightens it down. These two knobs just have a bolt, there's just a carriage bolt that goes through this top piece to this bottom and sandwiches it together, and that basically just locks these down to the aluminum extrusions. And so this gives a very accurate measurement of the angle. In the end, I don't use that a whole lot. I use this mostly for doing right angle cuts on any piece, and then most of the angled miter work I tend to do is actually smaller parts for little boxes and things like that. In that case, I will just use my Osborne gauge here for that. One of the things I really like about this is when I'm ripping with this, I can just slide this all off to the side. These are a little too tight right now. It needs some wax in there. And the toggle bolts are catching. There we go. So I can slide this out of the way and rip most pieces in here that I need to work with. And when the sheet goods get too big that I'm ripping, I can just remove this real quick and put it on. It takes about a minute to re-square it after I've removed it. So, and as long as I leave these locked down, I can just simply toggle these and it all comes back to square very well. I usually leave this up out of the way. So that's how that's made. These are, again, I bought all of this aluminum on Amazon. This one you do want to make sure. I started out with a thinner piece of this long extrusion for the fence. It turned out it was too flimsy at the end to lock these down. You can see this one's pretty stiff now. The first one had a little bit too much bend, so if I was cutting little pieces down here, it would tend to deflect and change the angle slightly. So I went to the 1.5 inch. I think this is 1.5 inch thick by 4 or 5 tall, and it's a lot more rigid. So you want to make sure that one, if you're going to make it pretty long like this, I think this one's 3.5 feet, maybe 4. Make sure it's stiff enough so that when you're all the way over here to your fence and you're pushing in here, it doesn't bend to change your angle.
All right, here I'm showing my lock that I put on for the top. Sometimes when you have a sheet good on there and you're not using the fence, you don't want it to move. So I added a spring-loaded stop, basically where I can flip the lever over and the pin goes into a little T-nut hole in the side of the rail, and that keeps the whole fence from sliding back and forth while I want it locked, and then I can just simply retract it and have it slide again. All right, now if I come around here, as I mentioned, I have this on a mobile base, and then I made a extension table that basically, if I back up here, you can see it wraps around the table itself. It gives me extra length out the back for handling sheet goods, and then I have an extra flip-up table at the back that I'll go over in a minute. That allows me to rip a full 8-foot sheet of anything and by myself, and it doesn't tip off the back. So, and that was my goal, is to not have to call my wife out here every time I needed to cut a 4x8 sheet of something. And then the extra width out here is nice for just as extra workbench space and for cutting large boards. I can cut a 12-foot or longer board on here crosscut and not have the edges tip off either. And so underneath is just a cabinet. Since I had to build a support anyway, I made a cabinet and I added 3-foot drawer slide with drawers, and that's where I keep a lot of my extra bolts and nuts and stuff under there. And then I made a rack on the end to hold some of my miter gauges and stuff. And you can see my dust collection comes in on the inside here, or the outside, and then I just ran a big HVAC 4-inch tube through the inside of the cabinet, and then it comes out on that side, and I run a tube up and over to the back port on the saw. So it kept it a little cleaner. So if I walk around this side, you can see there's the hose coming in. Because that cabinet is very deep, it's over 4 feet deep, I actually have drawers on the back side here as well, and it's just access for both sides because I can't really reach to the full depth from the one side, so it's kind of like two-sided access. And then there you can see my dust port hose coming in there to the inside, and that yellow thing is actually my automated blast gate. These are green gates. They don't make these anymore. The company went out of business during COVID, unfortunately. It's too bad because they work really well. I have them on all my tools. And then in the back here we have this flip down fence. What I did was I used these slide up and down stiffener bars that can slide down and can kind of connect these to the extrusions, because if I pull these up you can see, pull it up all the way. It doesn't want to stay. If I pull those up, I can bend this around and I can flip the bottom up, and then this goes up, tucks in underneath like that. Get that out of the way. So that can go up there, and if I take both of those up, this whole table folds down flat against the side and back of the saw, and I have this little flip up latch to grab it and hold it in place there. The point of all that is I wanted to be able to remove this table out of the way and save some space in my shop. And again, on this, I don't hardly ever fold it down. I find that it's pretty convenient to always have the extra length coming off the back of the saw, so I don't need any saw support stands or anything to rip big sheets. So I almost always leave that up, and that way I can do any sawing operation. And I've got enough space out here. I don't really need the extra room for most of the time. So so that's kind of it. If you have any questions or want to know anything at all about this, or want some better pictures, feel free to put something down in the comments and I will respond with anything you'd like. Thank you.